My name is Erica, and I'm 34 years old. I was standing in my bedroom holding the most beautiful dress I'd ever bought, ready for my mother's 60th birthday party tomorrow. Then my phone rang at 9 p.m. It was Mom, her voice cold and distant. She said I shouldn't come to her party because I wouldn't fit the elegant atmosphere she wanted. Apparently, I didn't look good enough compared to my sister Jessica and her successful new boyfriend. Before we continue this shocking story about how I discovered the truth that changed everything, please let me know where you're watching from today. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear how I found out I was actually this man's boss. Growing up as the older sister was never easy in our household. Jessica came into the world 3 years after me, and from the moment she arrived with her golden blonde hair and bright blue eyes that matched Mom's perfectly, I knew I would always be second place. I inherited Dad's features instead, the brown hair that never quite laid flat, brown eyes that Mom said were too serious, and a build that was sturdy rather than delicate. Mom would joke at family gatherings that Jessica got the beauty genes while I got the brains, but the way she said it made clear which one she valued more. I remember being 8 years old when Jessica broke Grandma's antique vase that had been in our family for 3 generations. Mom had specifically told us not to play near it, but Jessica wanted to dance in the living room. When the crash happened and Mom came running, Jessica immediately pointed at me with tears streaming down her 5-year-old face. Without even asking what happened, Mom sent me to my room for the rest of the day. I could hear her consoling Jessica downstairs, telling her accidents happen and she shouldn't feel bad about it. The pattern continued throughout our childhood in ways both big and small. When I was 12 and Jessica was 9, we both had piano recitals on the same day. I had practiced for months to perfect Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, staying up late every night to get each note exactly right. I won first place in my age category, the judge commenting on my exceptional technique and emotional depth. Jessica played a simple version of Fur Elise and forgot half the notes, finishing in last place. But when I looked out at the audience during my bow, Mom was busy taking photos of Jessica in her pink recital dress. She took 43 pictures of Jessica that day. She took 2 of me and 1 was blurry. My 16th birthday came and went with a small family dinner at home. Mom made spaghetti my least favorite meal because Jessica had requested it. There was a store-bought cake with the wrong name spelled on it because the bakery made a mistake and Mom didn't think it was worth going back to fix it. 3 months later, Jessica's 13th birthday was celebrated with a catered party for 50 guests in our backyard. Mom hired a DJ, a photographer, and even had a 3-tier custom cake made to look like a fashion runway because Jessica had just discovered her love for designer clothes. The party cost more than my entire year of piano lessons, which Mom had just told me we couldn't afford anymore. Dad tried to make things more equal when he could. He would sneak me $20 here and there, take me on special father-daughter lunches when Mom and Jessica went shopping, and always made sure to attend my academic competitions, even when Mom said they were boring. He called me his little warrior and said my strength would take me far in life. But Dad worked long hours at the construction company, often leaving before dawn and returning after dinner. His presence was a small comfort in an ocean of favoritism. When I turned 18 and got accepted to State University with a partial scholarship for academic excellence, Dad was the one who drove me to campus. Mom said she had to take Jessica to a modeling audition that day, though Jessica was only 15, and the audition turned out to be for a local mall catalog that never even called her back. Dad helped me carry boxes up 3 flights of stairs to my dorm room, set up my desk lamp, and made my bed with the sheets from home. Before he left, he hugged me tight and whispered that he was proud of me, that I was going to do amazing things. Those words carried me through 4 years of college. The call came during my senior year finals week. Dad had suffered a massive heart attack at work. By the time I got to the hospital driving 3 hours through a thunderstorm, he was already gone. Mom was crying over his body while Jessica held her, but when I walked in, Mom looked up and said the most hurtful thing she'd ever said to me. She said if I hadn't gone so far away for college, if I had stayed home like a good daughter should, maybe I could have convinced Dad to see a doctor about his chest pains. She blamed me for not being there, for choosing my education over family. The funeral was a blur of black clothes and casseroles from neighbors. I gave a eulogy that made grown men cry, talking about how Dad taught me to be strong, to work hard, to never give up, even when the world seemed against you. Jessica read a poem she found online, mispronouncing half the words. Mom thanked everyone for coming and praised Jessica for being so brave to speak in public. No one mentioned my speech. After Dad died, I threw myself into my studies with a determination that bordered on obsession. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in business administration and immediately started applying for jobs. Mom said I should come home, help her with the house, maybe work at the local bank like my cousin Linda. But I knew if I went back, I would suffocate under the weight of her disappointment that I wasn't Jessica. So I took an entry-level position at a tech startup in the city 200 miles from home and began building my life. The startup was called Digital Dynamics, and when I joined, there were only 12 employees working out of a converted warehouse. My starting salary was $38,000 a year, which barely covered my studio apartment rent and ramen noodle diet, but I saw potential in the company, and more importantly, in myself. I worked 12 to 14-hour days learning every aspect of the business, from coding basics to client relations. While other 22-year-olds were going to happy hours and weekend trips, I was analyzing market trends and writing business proposals. My direct supervisor quit 6 months after I started, and I volunteered to take on his responsibilities without asking for a title change or raise. The CEO, Marcus Thompson, noticed my dedication and began inviting me to senior leadership meetings. I was the youngest person in the room by at least 10 years, but I came prepared with data-driven insights and innovative solutions to problems they'd been struggling with for months. Within a year, I was promoted to business development manager with a team of 3 reporting to me. The company grew exponentially over the next 5 years. We went from 12 employees to 200, from one product to a full suite of financial technology solutions. I was instrumental in securing our Series B funding of $50 million personally, presenting to venture capitalists, and convincing them that our vision for democratizing financial services was not just profitable, but necessary. My salary grew from $38,000 to $90,000 to $150,000. By the time I turned 30, I was director of business development with a team of 25. Meanwhile, Jessica had graduated from high school with mediocre grades and convinced Mom to pay for her to attend a private fashion institute in the city. Not my city, thankfully, but close enough that she would occasionally call and ask to crash at my apartment when she wanted to party in my neighborhood. She lasted 1 semester before dropping out, claiming the professors didn't understand her artistic vision. She moved back home and started a blog about fashion and lifestyle, which Mom funded entirely, buying her professional camera equipment, designer clothes for photos, and even paying for her to travel to fashion weeks in Paris and Milan. Jessica's Instagram follower count became her primary accomplishment. Mom would call me monthly to update me on Jessica's numbers, how she'd gained another 1,000 followers, how a makeup brand had sent her free lipstick, how she was practically a celebrity now with her 15,000 followers. During these same calls, when I mentioned closing a $2 million deal or implementing a new system that increased revenue by 30%, Mom would respond with a distracted, "That's nice, dear," before returning to Jessica's social media metrics. I tried to maintain a relationship with my family despite the obvious favoritism. I sent expensive gifts for birthdays, and Christmas always carefully chosen based on their interests. I paid for Mom's roof replacement when she casually mentioned it was leaking, transferring $15,000 without her even asking. When Jessica wanted to attend a fashion influencer conference in Los Angeles, I quietly covered the $3,000 fee because I knew Mom's retirement savings were already depleted from funding Jessica's lifestyle. The promotion to vice president came when I was 33, after our company went public and valuation hit $1 billion. I was now managing a division of 200 employees across 4 offices with an annual budget of $50 million. My base salary was $300,000 with stock options worth potentially millions more. I bought a beautiful 2-bedroom condo in the financial district, hired a personal trainer, and finally started feeling like I had made it. But success felt hollow when I had no one to truly share it with. I dated occasionally, mostly men I met through work, but nothing serious ever developed. Mom liked to point this out during our quarterly phone calls, saying Jessica might not have a fancy job, but at least she had boyfriends. At least she knew how to make men happy. The comparison stung more than I cared to admit. 3 months ago, Jessica started dating someone new named Kevin Matthews. According to her breathless phone calls and Instagram posts, he was perfect. He drove a Porsche, lived in a penthouse, ran his own successful business, and treated her like a queen. Mom was over the moon finally. Her beautiful daughter had found someone worthy of her. She called me specifically to say Jessica had finally found her prince charming, and wasn't it wonderful that at least one of her daughters would give her grandchildren and a proper son-in-law to be proud of. I congratulated Jessica, sent her a designer handbag as a celebration gift, and continued focusing on my work. The technology sector was volatile, and our company was navigating a potential merger that required all of my attention. I was working 60-hour weeks, flying between offices, and negotiating with stakeholders who controlled billions in assets. But in Mom's eyes, none of that compared to Jessica having a boyfriend with a Porsche. 2 weeks before Mom's 60th birthday, I cleared my entire schedule. This was going to be a milestone celebration, and for once, I wanted to show Mom that I could do the daughter thing right. I made an appointment at Chanel and spent $5,000 on a dress that the sales associate assured me was elegant, sophisticated, and perfect for an evening celebration. It was rose gold silk with delicate beading, the kind of dress that whispered rather than shouted its value. I also spent weeks searching for the perfect gift. Mom had always talked about wanting to see the Amalfi Coast ever since she watched some movie filmed there in the 80s. I booked a 2-week luxury tour of Italy for 2 people, complete with first-class flights, 5-star hotels, and private guided excursions. The total cost was $20,000, but I wanted her to have something special, something that showed I paid attention to her dreams, even if she rarely paid attention to mine. Without telling anyone, I also contacted a Michelin-starred chef from my network and arranged for him to cater a surprise dinner at Mom's house the day after her party. I thought it would be nice for her to have something intimate with close family after the big celebration, something where she could relax and enjoy without worrying about hosting. The chef would prepare a 7-course meal with wine pairings, all of Mom's favorite dishes, elevated to fine dining standards. Jessica called me the week before the party, more excited than I'd heard her in years. She couldn't stop talking about Kevin and how everyone was going to be so impressed when they met him. Apparently, he had already charmed Mom during their dinner dates, bringing her flowers and complimenting her house and calling her by her first name like they were old friends. Jessica said Mom was already calling him her future son-in-law and had started planning their hypothetical wedding. When Jessica asked what I was wearing to the party, I told her about the Chanel dress. There was a pause on the line, then she laughed and said I should probably practice walking in heels, since I usually wore flats to work. She also suggested I might want to get my hair professionally done, since my usual bun made me look like a librarian. I bit my tongue and said I'd consider it, though her comments stung more than they should have. Mom called a few days later to go over the party details one more time. She had rented the country club where she and Dad got married, hired a band, arranged for catering for 100 guests. She mentioned several times that Kevin had offered to give a toast and that many of her friends were dying to meet Jessica's successful boyfriend. Almost as an afterthought, she asked if I was bringing anyone. When I said no, she sighed and said maybe I should consider online dating, since clearly my career-focused lifestyle wasn't attracting any men. The day before the party, I took off work early to prepare. I had a hair appointment at the salon Jessica always raved about, where they styled my brown hair in soft waves that made me look younger and softer. I got a manicure, pedicure, and even had my makeup professionally done and sealed so it would last through the evening. Looking in the mirror, I hardly recognized myself. I looked beautiful, elegant, like someone who belonged at a country club celebration. I was in my bathroom that evening practicing my speech for the toast I planned to give when my phone rang. It was 9 p.m., unusually late for Mom to call. Her name flashed on the screen, and for some reason my stomach dropped before I even answered. Maybe it was intuition, or maybe it was just years of experience that told me when Mom called at odd hours, it was never good news for me. Her voice was different from the start, cold and businesslike, like she was making a difficult work call rather than talking to her daughter. She didn't bother with pleasantries, just launched straight into it. She said she'd been thinking about the party and the guest list, and the overall atmosphere she wanted to create. This was a special milestone, she said, and she wanted everything to be perfect, especially since Kevin would be there, and he knew so many important people in the business world. Then she said the words that felt like a physical blow. She said I shouldn't come. She said it would be better if I didn't attend, because, and these were her exact words, I wouldn't fit the elegant atmosphere she was trying to create. She said Jessica and Kevin looked so good together like a magazine couple, and my presence would make things awkward. She actually used the word awkward like I was some embarrassing relative she had to hide rather than her eldest daughter. I could hear Jessica giggling in the background, and Mom didn't even try to shush her. She continued saying that I always dressed too conservatively, that my idea of fashion was boring business suits, that I didn't know how to be feminine or charming. She said her friends were expecting to meet Jessica's boyfriend, not hear about spreadsheets and profit margins from me. She suggested I could maybe come by the house next week for leftovers, if I really wanted to celebrate her birthday. I stood there in my beautiful Chanel dress with my professionally styled hair and perfect makeup, listening to my mother uninvite me from her birthday party because I wasn't decorative enough. The woman who I had supported financially for years, whose house I had saved from foreclosure, whose daughter's lifestyle I had secretly funded, was telling me I wasn't good enough to be seen at her party. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. I managed to say, okay, before hanging up. Then I sat on my bathroom floor in my $5,000 dress and cried until my professionally applied makeup ran down my face in black streams. I cried for the little girl who was never pretty enough for the teenager, who was never celebrated enough for the woman who was never enough, period. I called in sick the next day, something I had never done in my entire career, and spent Mom's birthday drinking wine and watching mindless television shows. But Sunday night, something shifted. I looked at myself in the mirror, saw the successful woman I had become, despite everything, and decided I was done being the family doormat. If Mom wanted elegant, if she wanted impressive, if she wanted someone who fit in with important business people, then I would show up to my office Monday morning and be exactly who I was, a vice president at a billion-dollar company who had earned her position through intelligence, hard work, and determination. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching my mood perfectly. I arrived at the office at 7 a.m., an hour earlier than usual, hoping to lose myself in quarterly reports and budget analyses. My assistant Jennifer noticed something was off and quietly brought me my favorite lavender tea without being asked. I threw myself into back-to-back meetings, reviewing proposals, analyzing market trends, and managing my team with the kind of focused intensity that had earned me my position. At 10 a.m., Jennifer knocked on my door with an unusual expression on her face. She said there was a Kevin Matthews here from a startup called Financial Forward, and he was hoping to pitch a new partnership opportunity. He didn't have an appointment, but he claimed it was time-sensitive and potentially worth millions in revenue. I almost said no, still feeling raw from the weekend, but the name sounded vaguely familiar, and I never turned down a potential opportunity without at least hearing it out. I told Jennifer to give me 5 minutes to review his company's basic information, then send him in. Financial Forward was a 2-year-old startup focused on peer-to-peer lending applications, currently pre-revenue, with seed funding running out in 3 months, according to the data I could quickly access. They were exactly the kind of company that came to us when they were desperate, hoping our established infrastructure could save their sinking ship. When the door opened and Kevin Matthews walked in, time seemed to slow down. He was tall, conventionally handsome in that generic way that looked good in photos, but lacked any real character. His suit was expensive, but slightly too tight, like he'd bought it when he had more muscle and less desperation. His watch was a Rolex that I immediately recognized as fake from the way the second hand ticked rather than swept. And his face the moment he saw me went from confident smile to complete panic in less than a second. It was Jessica's Kevin, her successful businessman boyfriend with the Porsche and the penthouse and the empire. Standing in my office, sweating through his expensive shirt, holding a pitch deck that I could see trembling in his hands. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of irony that bordered on the absurd. I let him stand there for a full 10 seconds, watching him realize exactly who I was and what this meant before I spoke. I kept my voice completely professional, the same tone I used with any potential partner. I invited him to sit, offered him water, which he accepted with shaking hands, and told him I had 30 minutes to hear his pitch. The look of relief on his face when I didn't immediately expose him was almost comical. He probably thought I didn't recognize him, or maybe that I was going to be the bigger person and separate personal from professional. He was wrong on both counts. Kevin's pitch was actually not terrible, which surprised me. His company had developed an interesting algorithm for risk assessment in peer lending that could potentially integrate well with our existing platforms. But as he talked, I took notes not just on his business model, but on the inconsistencies between what he was telling me and what he had told my family. He mentioned they were operating out of a co-working space in the cheaper part of town, not the high-rise office Jessica had gushed about. He talked about their burn rate and runway, clearly indicating they had maybe 2 months of funds left, not the successful, profitable business he'd portrayed. When he finished his presentation, I asked the kind of detailed questions that any competent executive would ask. What was their customer acquisition cost? What were their default rates? Who were their current investors? How much of his own money had he put into the company? With each answer, the truth became clearer. Kevin wasn't a successful businessman. He was a struggling founder with a failing startup, maxed out credit cards, and a trust fund that had run dry 6 months ago. The Porsche, when I asked about company assets, turned out to be a 3-year lease that he was 2 payments behind on. The penthouse was actually his college roommate's apartment, where he was sleeping on the couch after being evicted from his own place. His entire relationship with Jessica was built on lies so elaborate that I almost admired the effort it must have taken to maintain them. Almost. I pulled up his LinkedIn profile on my screen and cross-referenced it with the pitch deck. Every single accomplishment was either exaggerated or completely fabricated. He claimed to have worked at Goldman Sachs, but a quick call to my contact there revealed he had been a temp receptionist for 3 months. His MBA from Wharton was actually an online certificate course in business basics. His previous successful exit was actually a company that went bankrupt, taking several investors' money with it. As I gathered this information, Kevin's desperation became increasingly obvious. He started sweating more profusely, stumbling over words, making increasingly wild promises about potential returns. He mentioned that he had other investors interested, names I recognized as people who had already turned him down according to my network. Finally, when he realized I wasn't buying any of it, he broke. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper, and asked if we could speak off the record. When I nodded, maintaining my poker face, he admitted that he knew who I was. He had Googled Jessica's family before meeting them, had seen my LinkedIn, and knew exactly what I did. He had been hoping Jessica would eventually introduce us, thinking I might invest out of family obligation. But the relationship had moved faster than expected, and Mom had invited him to the birthday party before he could figure out how to handle the situation. Then came the most pathetic part. He actually asked me not to tell Jessica the truth. He said he really cared about her, that yes, he had exaggerated some things, but his feelings were genuine. He claimed he was going to tell her the truth eventually, once his company took off, once he could be the man she thought he was. He even suggested that with my investment, he could make it all true, that I could help him become worthy of my sister. I let him finish his ridiculous plea, then pulled out a folder I had been preparing while he talked. Inside was a complete due diligence report on both his company and him personally. Credit reports showing $600,000 in debt. Legal documents showing 2 pending lawsuits from former business partners. Screenshots of his dating profiles on 3 different sugar daddy websites where he was actively looking for wealthy women to support him. The evidence was devastating and undeniable. I placed the folder on the desk between us and watched the last of his confidence crumble. But I wasn't done. I pulled out a second document, a standard rejection letter for his funding proposal. It detailed in professional language why his company was not a viable investment opportunity, listing every flaw in his business model, every red flag in his finances, every reason why any competent investor would run far away from Financial Forward. I told him he had 2 choices. He could continue his charade with Jessica, and I would send this complete file to her mom and every person at that birthday party he had tried to impress. Or he could walk away now, admit to some vague emergency, and disappear from their lives forever. I gave him 60 seconds to decide, watching the second hand on my real Cartier watch tick by while he scrambled to process his options. Kevin left my office looking like a broken man, mumbling something about needing to handle an urgent situation. I knew he would run, guys like him always did when their cons were exposed, but I wasn't satisfied with just sending him away. That evening, Jessica called me crying, saying Kevin had sent her a text, saying he had to leave the country immediately for a business emergency and didn't know when he'd be back. She was devastated, confused, and for the first time in our entire relationship, she called me seeking comfort. I listened to her sob for 30 minutes, making appropriate sympathetic noises, while feeling absolutely no guilt about orchestrating Kevin's exit. She talked about how perfect the party had been, how everyone had loved him, how Mom had already started calling him her son-in-law. Apparently, he had given a toast at the party that had everyone in tears talking about finding true love and building an empire worthy of a princess. The irony was so thick I could barely breathe through it. Then Jessica said something that made me reconsider my silence. She mentioned that Kevin had suggested they move in together, that he'd been pushing her to add him to her credit cards for business expenses, that he'd even asked if Mom might want to invest in his company as a family opportunity. My sister, for all her faults, didn't deserve to be financially ruined by a con artist, so I made a decision that would either destroy our relationship completely or finally give me the confrontation 34 years in the making. I told Jessica I needed to tell her something important, but it had to be in person. I said I would come to Mom's house that evening around 9 p.m., and she should make sure Mom was there too. Jessica, still crying over Kevin's departure, agreed immediately, probably hoping I had some information about where he went. I hung up and spent the next 2 hours preparing my presentation the same way I would prepare for a board meeting where millions were at stake. Because in a way, that's exactly what this was. I put on my best power suit, a black Tom Ford ensemble that cost more than Jessica's entire wardrobe. I styled my hair in the severe bun she always mocked, applied minimal makeup that emphasized my natural features rather than hiding them. I looked exactly like what I was, a powerful executive who had built her success on intelligence and hard work, rather than Instagram filters and manipulation. I printed out Kevin's complete file, placed it in my monogrammed leather portfolio, and drove to my childhood home. The house looked different somehow as I pulled into the driveway at exactly 9 p.m. Maybe it was because I knew this would be the last time I entered as the daughter who accepted whatever scraps of affection were thrown her way. There were still balloons tied to the mailbox from the party silver and gold arrangements that probably cost more than Mom used to spend on my entire birthday celebrations. I could see figures moving in the living room through the windows, and I took one deep breath before ringing the doorbell of the house I had paid to renovate. Mom answered the door in her casual evening wear designer loungewear Jessica had probably picked out, and I had unknowingly funded. Her face went through a series of expressions when she saw me: surprise, confusion, and then that familiar disappointment that she didn't even try to hide anymore. She actually asked what I was doing there, as if I was some unwelcome salesperson, rather than her daughter, who she had uninvited from her birthday celebration just 3 days ago. Before I could answer, Jessica appeared behind her eyes red and puffy from crying, wearing one of Kevin's hoodies that he'd apparently left behind. She looked so young and vulnerable that for a moment I almost felt guilty about what I was about to do. But then Mom made a comment about how at least one of us had the decency to dress appropriately for lounging at home, and my sympathy evaporated like morning dew in the desert. I walked into the living room without waiting for an invitation, noting that pictures from the party were already framed and displayed on the mantel. Jessica and Kevin featured prominently in every shot, looking exactly like the golden couple Mom had always dreamed of having in the family. There wasn't a single photo that included a space where I might have stood. They had literally framed me out of the celebration before I was even uninvited. I set my portfolio on the coffee table, the same one Dad used to put his feet on, until Mom yelled at him and turned to face them both. I started by congratulating Mom on her party, saying I'd heard it was lovely from the photos Jessica posted online. Mom had the audacity to say it would have been perfect if Kevin hadn't had to leave early, that several of her friends were disappointed they didn't get to spend more time with Jessica's impressive boyfriend. That was my opening. I pulled out the first document from my portfolio, Kevin's actual business filing, showing his company's desperate financial state. I explained in the simplest terms possible that Kevin Matthews was not a successful businessman, but a failing entrepreneur with 2 months of runway left and no viable path to profitability. Mom tried to interrupt, but I held up my hand and continued with the methodical precision I used when destroying competitor arguments in boardrooms. I showed them the lease agreement for the Porsche, highlighting the past due notices. I presented the text messages between Kevin and his actual roommate discussing how to keep up the penthouse lie. I revealed his dating profiles where he specifically targeted wealthy women using the exact same lines he had used on Jessica. With each piece of evidence, Jessica's face grew paler, while Mom's grew redder, though for very different reasons. Jessica was horrified by the deception, realizing that every romantic gesture, every sweet word, every promise had been calculated to extract maximum financial benefit. But Mom wasn't angry at Kevin. She was furious at me. She accused me of being jealous of trying to ruin Jessica's happiness because I couldn't find my own. She said I had probably fabricated the documents, that I was bitter about being uninvited, and was taking revenge like a petty child. I pulled out my phone and showed them the security footage from my office that morning, time-stamped and undeniable. There was Kevin sitting across from me, sweating through his fake designer shirt as he begged for investment money. The audio was crystal clear as he admitted to lying about everything as he tried to leverage my family connection for funding. Jessica started crying harder, but Mom still wouldn't accept it. She said I had probably threatened him, used my position to intimidate him into leaving. That's when I lost my carefully maintained composure. I told them about every financial gift I had given over the years, keeping meticulous records like the businesswoman I was. The roof replacement, the car repairs, Jessica's fashion school tuition, her blog expenses, the designer clothes Mom wore to her own party. I had receipts for everything, bank transfers totaling over $200,000 over the past decade. Money given freely without expectation of acknowledgement, let alone gratitude. Mom's face went white as she realized the truth. Her successful daughter, the one she was too embarrassed to have at her party, had been funding the lifestyle she used to impress her friends. The boring one with the spreadsheets and profit margins had been the one keeping her in designer clothes and country club memberships. The daughter who didn't look good enough in photos had been beautiful enough to earn the money that made those photos possible. Jessica surprised me by being the first to apologize. She said she had suspected something was off about Kevin, but ignored the red flags because she wanted so badly to be the successful one for once. She admitted to knowing about some of my financial help but hadn't realized the extent. She said she was sorry for laughing in the background during that horrible phone call, that she had been caught up in the moment and Mom's approval. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was more than I had ever expected from her. Mom, however, doubled down. She said that family was supposed to help each other, that giving money didn't make me special or give me the right to destroy Jessica's happiness. She accused me of being cold calculating, said that this was why I was alone, because I approached everything like a business transaction instead of with heart. She said Dad would be ashamed of what I had become, successful, but soulless. Invoking Dad was her biggest mistake. I stood up, gathered my documents, and looked her directly in the eye. I told her Dad would be proud that I had protected my sister from a con artist. He would be proud that I had built something from nothing. He would be proud that I had succeeded despite having a mother who saw me as nothing more than an ATM with an embarrassing face. He would be devastated to know that his wife had become someone who valued Instagram photos over integrity. I left the house with Mom screaming that I was no longer welcome in her life, that she was done trying to love someone so difficult. Jessica followed me to my car, mascara streaming down her face, begging me not to leave like this. I told her I loved her, that I always had, but I was done being the family secret. I gave her Kevin's full file to do with as she pleased, and drove away from my childhood home for what I assumed would be the last time. The notifications started before I even reached my condo. 47 text messages, 23 missed calls, and dozens of Facebook messages from relatives who had been at the party. Apparently, Jessica had immediately started making calls, sharing what she had learned about Kevin, and the news had spread through Mom's social circle like wildfire through dry grass. The same people who had been charmed by his smooth talking were now horrified to learn they had almost welcomed a con artist into their community. My Aunt Margaret, Mom's older sister, was the first to leave a voicemail that wasn't hostile. She said she had always wondered how Mom afforded her lifestyle on a widow's pension, and now it made sense. She said she was proud of me for protecting Jessica, even after how poorly they had both treated me. She mentioned that she'd noticed my absence at the party and had asked Mom about it, only to be told I was too busy with work to attend. The lie had seemed odd at the time, but now she understood the real reason. More messages followed from cousins and family friends, all expressing variations of the same sentiment. They were impressed by my success, shocked by Mom's behavior, and apologetic for not seeing the dynamic earlier. Several mentioned that they had always thought it strange how Mom talked about Jessica's every accomplishment while barely mentioning me despite my obvious achievements. The validation was nice, but felt hollow after years of being invisible. Jessica texted throughout the night a stream of consciousness mixture of apologies, revelations, and anger. She was furious at Kevin, but also at herself for being so blind. She admitted to seeing the signs like how he always forgot his wallet, how his stories didn't quite add up, how he redirected every conversation about his business to vague promises about future success. She had wanted to believe in the fairy tale so badly that she had ignored her own instincts. She also shared more details about the party that hurt more than I expected. Apparently, Mom had told everyone I was traveling for business too important to make time for family. She had actually turned my success into another form of rejection, making it seem like I chose work over her birthday, rather than admitting she had uninvited me. Several guests had brought cards for me that Mom had quietly hidden, planning to throw them away rather than forward them. The most surprising message came from Marcus Thompson, my first CEO at the startup. He had sold his shares when we went public and retired to become an angel investor. Somehow, through the bizarre network of Silicon Valley gossip, he had heard about my confrontation with Kevin. He said he had actually been approached by Financial Forward months ago and had immediately recognized it as a poorly conceived scheme. He was impressed that I had handled the situation with such professional grace and wanted to discuss a new venture he was considering. Mom remained silent for 3 days. No calls, no texts, not even a passive-aggressive Facebook post. Jessica said she had locked herself in her room, refusing to talk to anyone, including the friends who were calling to gossip about the Kevin situation. The country club had apparently become a hotbed of scandal, with everyone discussing how Kevin had almost conned one of their own. Mom's reputation as a discerning judge of character was in ruins. When Mom finally reached out, it was through a text message so brief it could have been a business communication. 5 words that somehow managed to convey both defeat and defiance. She wrote simply that we needed to talk. No apology, no acknowledgement of wrong, just a demand disguised as a request. I could have ignored it, probably should have ignored it, but some part of me, maybe the little girl who still wanted her mother's approval, agreed to meet. We met at a coffee shop downtown Neutral Territory, where neither of us had the home advantage. Mom looked older somehow, as if the past few days had aged her years. Her usually perfect makeup was slightly smudged, and she was wearing regular clothes instead of her typical designer ensemble. She looked more like the woman who had raised me before Jessica was born, before the competition for a crown I never wanted to wear. She started by saying she had been thinking about everything, about the money, about Kevin, about the party. But instead of apologizing, she launched into a defense of her actions. She said I had never understood the pressure she was under, being a single mother after Dad died, trying to maintain appearances in their social circle. She said Jessica needed more support because she wasn't as naturally capable as I was, that my success proved I hadn't needed her attention. I listened to her justifications with the same detachment I used when firing underperforming employees. When she finished, I calmly explained that being capable didn't mean I hadn't needed love. That watching her celebrate Jessica's every breath while ignoring my accomplishments had shaped me in ways she couldn't imagine. That her inability to see my worth beyond my financial contributions was exactly why our relationship had become transactional. Then she said something that actually surprised me. She admitted to being intimidated by me even when I was young. She said I reminded her of Dad's mother, a woman who had built a successful business in the 50s when women weren't supposed to be anything but wives. Grandmother had always made Mom feel inadequate, and apparently I had inherited that same intensity. It wasn't an excuse, but it was the first honest thing she had said about our relationship in years. We talked for 2 hours, really talked, not the surface-level conversations we usually had. Mom admitted to making mistakes, though she stopped short of a full apology. She revealed that she had been living beyond her means for years, trying to maintain the lifestyle Dad had provided, and my financial support had been the only thing preventing bankruptcy. She had uninvited me from the party because one of her friends had made a snide comment about Jessica finally catching up to my success, and she couldn't bear the comparison. I told her about the therapy I had been attending for 5 years to deal with my childhood trauma, about how I had learned to find worth in myself beyond achievements and bank accounts, about how lonely it was to succeed without family to celebrate with, about how much it hurt to be erased from her life whenever it was convenient. For the first time in my adult life, I saw my mother cry real tears, not the performative ones she used to manipulate situations. She asked if we could start over, try to build something new. I told her that starting over wasn't possible, that the past had happened and couldn't be erased, but we could try to move forward with boundaries and honest communication. I made it clear that I would no longer tolerate being hidden or diminished, that my financial support came with the condition of basic respect. She agreed, though I could see it pained her to accept terms from her daughter. Jessica had been texting me throughout my meeting with Mom, anxious about what was happening. She had spent the days since the confrontation doing her own soul-searching. She had deactivated her Instagram, canceled her blog, and started looking at job listings. The revelation about Kevin had apparently triggered a broader realization about the fictional nature of her entire online persona. She wanted to build something real, even if it was less photogenic. When I got home, Jessica was waiting in my building's lobby. Security knew her and had let her wait inside. She looked different without her usual full makeup and designer outfit, younger, but also more genuine. She had brought Chinese takeout from the place we used to go with Dad when Mom was at her book club. It was a peace offering wrapped in nostalgia, and despite everything, I invited her up. We ate lo mein and orange chicken while she talked about her plans to go back to school for marketing. She had realized that she actually understood social media and branding. She just needed formal education to make it legitimate. She asked if I would help her, not financially, but with advice and guidance. It was the first time she had ever asked me for something other than money, and I found myself oddly emotional about it. 6 months have passed since Mom's 60th birthday party, and our family dynamics have shifted in ways I never thought possible. The therapeutic family sessions we started attending together have been painful but productive. Our therapist, Dr. Williams, has helped us understand the generational patterns that led to our dysfunction. Mom's own mother had played favorites with her children, always preferring Aunt Margaret's beauty to Mom's plainness. The cycle of comparison and competition had been passed down like a toxic heirloom. Jessica got accepted into State University's marketing program, the same school I graduated from 12 years ago. She's living in a modest apartment, working part-time at a digital marketing firm, and actually enjoying the struggle of building something herself. She calls me twice a week for advice on everything from study techniques to professional networking. Last week, she got her first promotion based on a social media campaign she designed, and the pride in her voice was more genuine than anything I'd heard from her before. Mom has downsized from the house to a nice but reasonable condo in a retirement community. She sold most of her designer items and actually seemed relieved to let go of the pressure to maintain appearances. She started volunteering at the local library, running a book club for seniors, and has made friends who don't know anything about our family drama. When she introduces me now, she says, "This is my daughter Erica, the vice president," with actual pride instead of resentment. The relationship isn't perfect and never will be. There are still moments when Mom slips into old patterns, when she compares us without thinking, or when she makes a comment about my appearance or lack of romantic life. But now I call her out immediately, and she actually apologizes instead of doubling down. Jessica still has moments of entitlement, expecting things to come easy, but she catches herself and course corrects. Kevin Matthews tried to contact Jessica once, about 3 months after everything exploded. He had moved to Arizona and was working as a sales representative for a pyramid scheme wellness company. He sent her a long email about how he had really cared for her, how he was getting his life together, how they could start fresh. Jessica forwarded it to me with a single comment that made me genuinely laugh. She wrote that she'd rather date someone real with a Honda than someone fake with a Porsche. My professional life has continued to flourish. I was promoted to CEO 6 weeks ago when our current chief executive retired. At 34, I'm one of the youngest CEOs of a public technology company. The announcement made business news headlines, and Mom actually framed the Wall Street Journal article in her new apartment. It sits next to a photo of Jessica at her first marketing conference and a family photo we took at therapy last month, all three of us looking genuinely happy. I've also started dating William, a corporate lawyer I met at a conference. He's brilliant, kind, and completely unimpressed by social media or status symbols. He makes me laugh, challenges my ideas, and has never once suggested I should dress differently or be less ambitious. Mom was skeptical at first, worried he was after my money, but Jessica was the one who defended him, recognizing genuine affection versus calculated interest. It was a reversal of roles that surprised all of us. The Italy trip I had booked for Mom's birthday was rescheduled, and last month she and Aunt Margaret went together. Mom sent photos every day, not posed Instagram shots, but real moments of joy. Her favorite was from the Amalfi Coast, where she scattered some of Dad's ashes we had saved. She said she told him about everything that had happened, and she felt like he would be proud of how we were all trying to do better. Jessica is dating a guy named Tom, who works in accounting at her university. He's steady, genuine, and completely oblivious to designer brands. When she brought him to family dinner last week, he spent most of the time asking me about market trends, and Mom about her book recommendations. There was no performance, no pretense. Just a normal guy who liked Jessica for who she actually was, rather than who she pretended to be. Sometimes I think about that phone call about being uninvited from the party, and I realize it was the best thing that could have happened to our family. It forced us to confront decades of dysfunction, to acknowledge the lies we had all been living. Mom had been lying about her finances and her favoritism. Jessica had been lying about her satisfaction with her superficial life. And I had been lying about being okay with being invisible. The financial support I provide now comes with transparency and boundaries. I pay for family therapy and Jessica's tuition, but Mom manages her own expenses within her means. Jessica has never asked for money beyond education costs, and she's already planning how she'll pay me back once she graduates. The transactions are clean, honest, and don't come with hidden emotional costs. My biggest realization through all of this has been that success isn't just about professional achievements or bank account balances. It's about having the courage to demand respect, to set boundaries, and to walk away from toxic situations, even when they involve family. It's about knowing your worth beyond what others project onto you. And sometimes it's about being excluded from the party, so you can finally stop pretending you wanted to be there in the first place. I keep the Chanel dress I bought for Mom's party in my closet, unworn but not forgotten. It reminds me of the night I thought I wasn't good enough, only to discover I had always been more than enough. Jessica asked me once why I kept it, why I didn't return it or donate it. I told her it was my $3,000 reminder that you can't buy your way into being valued by people who don't have the capacity to see your worth. Last week we had a small celebration for my CEO announcement at Mom's apartment. Nothing fancy, just takeout Chinese food and a cake from the grocery store. Mom made a toast that made all of us cry. She said she was proud of both her daughters, one for having the courage to build an empire and the other for having the courage to start over. She said Dad would be amazed at the women we had become, not because of our accomplishments, but because we had learned to be honest with each other. As I looked around that small table at my imperfect but improving family, I realized something profound. I had spent my entire life trying to earn a place at their table, never realizing I had the power to build my own. Being uninvited from Mom's birthday party had forced me to stop seeking admission to spaces where I wasn't valued and start creating spaces where I was centered. And in the end, they had to earn their places at my table, not the other way around. The last thing Kevin ever posted on his social media before disappearing completely was a quote about how successful people don't seek revenge. Jessica screenshotted it and sent it to me with a laughing emoji. She was right to laugh. Successful people absolutely do seek revenge. They just call it due diligence, market correction, and protecting shareholder value. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they call it saving your sister from a con artist, while simultaneously teaching your mother that the daughter she was embarrassed by was the one she should have been bragging about all along. There's a conference next month where I'll be speaking about women in technology leadership. Mom and Jessica both asked if they could attend. Not because they have to, not for appearances, but because they want to hear what I have to say. Jessica is even helping me design my presentation slides using her marketing skills to make data visually compelling. Mom is reading books about the tech industry so she can understand my references. They're trying, really trying to enter my world the way I spent decades trying to enter theirs. Sometimes late at night, I think about calling that therapist Mom made us see when we were kids, the one who said Jessica and I just had different strengths that should be celebrated equally. I want to tell her she was wrong. We didn't have different strengths. We had a mother who assigned us roles before we could choose them ourselves. Jessica was the pretty one because Mom decided she was. I was the smart one because Mom needed me to be. Neither of us got to be whole people until the whole system collapsed under the weight of one ridiculous lie about a birthday party. The business world has a term called creative destruction, where old systems must be completely dismantled before new, better ones can be built. That's what happened to our family. Kevin's con was just the catalyst, but the destruction had been inevitable. You can only build so high on a foundation of lies before everything collapses. The question isn't whether it will fall, but whether you'll have the strength to build something better from the ruins. We're still building, still figuring out how to be a family without the roles and expectations that defined us for so long. Some days are better than others. Some conversations still end in tears or anger. But we keep showing up, keep trying, keep choosing to do the work instead of returning to the comfortable dysfunction we knew. Because that's what real success looks like, not the perfect Instagram family at a country club party, but three imperfect women sitting around a small table, finally seeing each other clearly. If you've made it this far in my story, you probably have your own family dynamics, your own experiences with favoritism, rejection, or being undervalued by the people who should love you most. I want you to know that you're not alone, and more importantly, that your worth isn't determined by their inability to see it. Sometimes the best gift someone can give you is excluding you from their toxicity, even if it doesn't feel like a gift at the time. So here's my question for you, and I'd really love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever been excluded from something that ended up being the best thing that could have happened to you? Have you had to set boundaries with family who couldn't see your worth? How did you find the strength to demand better treatment from people who should have loved you unconditionally? Please share your stories because I've learned that speaking our truths is the first step in healing from them. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life stories about family success and finding your worth beyond others' perceptions. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they're enough exactly as they are, even if their family hasn't figured that out yet. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't proving them wrong, it's proving yourself right. Until next time, this is Erica reminding you that you don't need an invitation to your own success story. You just need the courage to write it yourself, one authentic chapter at a time. Be well, be strong, and most importantly, be unapologetically yourself.